Hey gang! In April 2019, director, producer, and showrunner Ryan Murphy hosted a benefit performance of the Broadway musical The Prom and announced that he was planning on directing and producing a film adaptation to be released in fall 2020. The general response from theater audiences ranged from, "Oh, that's unexpected, but neat," to, "What? Why that show?" to, "Oh god, not Ryan Murphy." The show centers around four narcissistic Broadway actors who go to Indiana to help a teenage lesbian after her school cancels prom because she wanted to bring her girlfriend as a date. The Broadway show was a critical darling with rave reviews for its joyful tone, energetic dancing, and heartfelt message, but had lukewarm audience attendance and closed within a year. Despite this, months before the show was even announced to close, it was set to be one of Netflix's next big film ventures, and in December 2020, The Prom premiered on the streaming app and in theaters, receiving lackluster reviews and, at best, a polarizing audience response. In some ways, why wouldn't we expect that a show that could not sustain an audience on Broadway also had a disappointing performance as a film? But although the movie has a lot of bright spots, it's also stuffed with missed opportunities and nonsensical choices that, if fixed, could have made this film a cultural touchpoint in young queer circles. And the fact that it wasn't is pretty frustrating. So The Prom combines two of my favorite types of content, which is lesbian stuff and musical theater, but even with that slam dunk of a concept, the final product leaves a lot to be desired. So I have dressed up a little bit for the occasion to talk about The Prom, why it works, why it doesn't, and why we can blame Ryan Murphy for all of it. 1. Why we can blame Ryan Murphy. Many people first got to know Ryan Murphy as a household name for creating Glee, but he has created, directed, and written several TV shows for 20th Century Fox. His work has definitely broken barriers for LGBT characters, and he tries to amplify artists from marginalized backgrounds. But for all of his efforts to showcase diversity and equality, he'll always write or allow really offensive dialogue for the sake of an easy throwaway joke. And he pushes aside promising character development in order to add unnecessary shock value. But those critiques never stop Murphy from creating show after show on TV, most of the time to great success. So here comes The Prom, a story that actually fits in very well with Ryan Murphy's favorite themes for his work: hidden cruelty under a beautiful or charming exterior, the fragile nature of social hierarchy, and letting the underdog shine. But Murphy also had a personal resonance with the play. Like the protagonist Emma, Murphy also grew up as a gay kid in Indiana, was disowned by his parents because of it, and wasn't able to go to his prom with the date that he wanted. So once he saw the show on Broadway in 2019 and fell in love with it, he immediately pitched it to his current artistic home, Netflix, a studio known for giving creators wide-ranging artistic freedom. Only Ryan Murphy could take a financial flop that has no mainstream name recognition and no Tony Awards and turn it into this big-budget movie musical on Netflix in just a year and a half. And this is why the answer to everything about this movie is blame Ryan Murphy. Every artistic choice, good or bad, will fall onto him. His fingerprints are all over the film, and he is the reason why it exists in the first place. And to start, one of the major ways I blame Ryan Murphy for The Prom is number 2, style. So I'm going to do something that will upset a lot of people, and that's compliment Glee, but it'll only be for a minute, I swear. Yeah, we all know now that Glee pretty much sucks. But one thing I commend of it is that it made a strong choice about how to style its musical numbers and how they exist in the world of the show. In Glee, no character bursts into song like in a traditional musical. All of the musical numbers are happening in the reality of the characters, either in a performance context or used as a literal way for a character to express an idea or emotion or theme to someone else. This offered some groundedness to the fast-paced, maybe it's satire, maybe it takes itself way too seriously show, and it gives a very distinct point of view on the role of performance in the lives of the characters. It had the effect of feeling like you were an audience to the performances like the rest of the Glee Club. Wow, it's like I'm really there listening to the auto-tuned 25-year-olds, 16-year-olds perform live in the room. The Prom is the opposite. Although a couple of the songs are actual performances, most of the songs in the show are symbolic and are not really happening for the characters. And with the exception of Unruly Heart, unlike in Glee, you don't see the musical instruments that make the music because, it's cinematic magic that lets us hear the music in our hearts and whatnot. Glee and The Prom are similar in that they both relish in the joy, in the creative expression, and in the capacity for empathy that the performing arts generates. But while Ryan Murphy had a very strong sense of style for Glee by making all the songs in-world, keeping the production values for each number generally realistic, and filming each song as basically a music video, his vision doesn't have that same payoff in The Prom. In an interview with the Prom cinematographer Matthew Libatique for Collider, Libatique talks about how the starting point for the visual style of the film came from visually distinguishing two worlds, Indiana and Broadway. Basically, Indiana is represented through yellow and beige sets, and the magic of theater spills onto the sets with blue, pink, and purple neon lights, while brightly dressed colors fill the landscape and bring life to the small town. It's a choice that makes artistic sense because it makes a lot of these musical sequences have an inherent dreamlike quality to them. It's a visual homage to the 1980s, which inspired a lot of the music and style of the show, and it's just an in-your-face visual representation of queerness. On paper, that seems like a cohesive visual style, but over half of the music numbers use this very specific lighting style. Ironically, it makes a lot of the musical numbers feel kind of bland because they aren't visually distinguished enough from each other to justify their existence in the film. There are some very beautiful sequences like Dance With You that actually feel magical, but that's the exception and not the norm. It doesn't help that nearly every musical number incorporates the same fast-paced, zigzaggy camera movement that makes them really difficult to follow. Ryan Murphy clearly wanted a film to be energetic, and for him, energy means constant camera movement and constant edits. Want to see some intricate choreography? Well, the camera's gotta zoom around, but trust us, they're dancing good. Want to see a really intimate romantic moment? Sorry, we have to keep doing cuts because intimacy is boring. Need to see people's faces? Now we gotta sweep the camera 360 degrees or else we all explode. This type of camera movement worked better in something like Glee, in which every song is basically a self-contained music video, but in a movie musical, every song, or at least most songs, are supposed to drive the plot forward or drive character arcs. So when the camera is constantly moving, especially when it's not motivated by the music or the movement happening on screen, it's hard to track what the characters' faces are doing and what they're feeling. So maybe these songs are energetic to watch in the moment, but it's pretty exhausting to have to do that for 2 hours. Because so much time is spent on the energy rather than on the emotional resonance of a song. But none of my problems with the visual style of the film compares to my other problems with it, like number 3, the real casting problems. Okay, so when I say casting, you're probably assuming that I'm just going to rant about James Corden for the rest of the movie, but grab your pitchforks and revoke my gay card, because that's not what I'm gonna do. A lot of people complain that the way Corden portrayed Barry as a gay stereotype, but like, I work in theater, and Corden's performance as a middle-aged gay white actor was extremely familiar to me. I also don't see how a gay actor could play this character much more authentically, quote-unquote, considering some of the dialogue.
I am as gay as a bucket of wigs. A bucket of them!
But even if I hated his performance, I'm not gonna put it all on Corden. I'm gonna blame Ryan Murphy. This is a movie in which white, middle-aged gay men were on the writing team and in the director's and producer's chair. If Ryan Murphy had a problem with how the character was written or Corden's performance in it, then he would have changed it, but he chose not to. I think the real casting problem extends far beyond James Corden and more has to do with the way Ryan Murphy likes to use casting as a way to like wink and nod. James Corden playing a flamboyant gay man, Nicole Kidman playing a kooky Fosse dancer, Meryl Streep playing Patti LuPone, a narcissistic Broadway actor, are really humorous ideas. Even casting Andrew Reynolds, the only person fully qualified for his role, is a bit of a wink, since his big number Love Thy Neighbor parallels the tone and theme to his Tony Award-winning role in The Book of Mormon. But casting this group of 4 actors kind of undermines an important theme in The Prom, which is the way that celebrities overinflate their importance. When you cast unknown actors to play your 2 romantic leads, but then your biggest name celebrities play characters in which they're supposed to learn their celebrity doesn't really matter, then you've already overinflated their purpose in the story and kind of undermined your message. And not only that, but you give the celebrities more to do than your main characters, and I'm gonna get to that because that's the most frustrating part of this movie. In many other circumstances, I wouldn't complain about this. Movie musicals are risky, and so studios usually want some guaranteed star power behind them, and sometimes casting is a producer choice and not an artistic choice. But this is Netflix, a studio that has spent millions of dollars trying to get Ryan Murphy, perhaps the most prolific director-producer in Hollywood right now, to work for them. Murphy could have done the movie with the entire original Broadway cast if he wanted to, without any interference from Netflix. In fact, all the main cast from the original Broadway production auditioned for the film, and Ryan Murphy said no to all of them. That was his choice! I'm kind of shocked Murphy just didn't go with the original Broadway cast, considering that he barely bothered to change anything else in the show. And that leads me to my next point. 4. Not enough adaptation. So here's a case study. In the months before the 2007 release of the movie version of Broadway hit musical Hairspray, fans found out that the movie would make substantial cuts and alterations to the song list and script. Some of the most popular songs in the show, including Mama, I'm a Big Girl Now and It Takes Two, would be cut and only available on the soundtrack. This caused a lot of outrage and fear for big fans of the musical. How could this movie capture the spirit of the original show if you cut the best songs? But when you watch the film, you actually see it was for the better. For example, It Takes Two was replaced with a new song written for the movie, the much more energetic Lady's Choice, which gave Link a chance to see Tracy dance and made a much more dynamic start to their romance than in the show. Additionally, the movie also vastly changed the sequence of events in the story. In the stage version, I Know Where I've Been happens close to the end of the show and takes place after the teenage main characters escape from jail following an anti-segregation protest, and Motormouth Maybelle sings it to remind the teenagers on why the fight for equality is important. But in the movie, the song is moved up and becomes the anthem for the same anti-segregation protest that we actually see on screen, which makes the entire sequence far more emotionally resonant and also makes the song relevant to the plot. The film also incorporated a song that was cut from the original stage production. This song, New Girl in Town, used a montage, something that uniquely exists in film and not theater, to demonstrate Tracy's growing popularity within the Corny Collins show and to underscore the difference between the normally white-led Corny Collins show and the one day a year it's hosted and led by black performers. And finally, the script just made a lot of changes to better balance the campy satirical tone of the piece with the more serious social justice themes. All these changes result in Hairspray being one of the few modern movie musical adaptations that is loved by both ardent fans of the show and people unfamiliar with the source material. And that's because the filmmakers used the medium of film to create a very compelling and thematically faithful adaptation, even though a lot of the core material changed. And you probably know where I'm going with this. In The Prom, none of that happens. There are no songs that are added nor cut, which surprises me because I feel like there's a lot of redundancy in the song list. Any changes to the sequence of events are minor and don't streamline things, and if you were to read the Broadway script while watching the film, you'd see that entire pages of dialogue are exactly the same word for word. Normally, when you adapt a stage play to be a film, studios give time for screenwriters to write that adaptation. Particularly on a large studio-backed movie musical, there's often at least a year just spent on script development. But I guess because Ryan Murphy had a lot of other projects going on and wanted to squeeze this out as fast as possible, or because he thought the show was perfect except for the fact it needed more Barry, the entire production cycle of The Prom occurred in just over a year and a half. And that includes a couple months where they had to pause filming due to coronavirus. So there just wasn't a script development process at all, and I think it's noticeable. In fact, I'm going to give you a list of all of the major script changes from stage to screen. They are as followed. They put the part where the PTA formally cancels prom at the very beginning rather than after the opening number. They cut Emma's ending solo from Dance With You. They added a scene between Barry and Emma's grandmother, who isn't a character in the play. They added a scene between Barry and Dee Dee in their hotel in which Barry goes in depth about his estrangement from his parents. They added a reconciliation between Barry and his mom, who isn't a character in the play. They cut the last part of the duet between Emma and Alyssa in You Happened. They switched the order of Alyssa Green and Love Thy Neighbor. And that's it. That's all the changes. For a big movie musical adaptation, that's barely anything. But as a film, it's detrimental to the viewing experience because it just feels longer than it needs to, and there are too many sequences that don't serve the plot or characters. It's exhilarating to watch when you're in the room, but on film, too many of them can just be exhausting. What purpose does Zaz serve other than to justify casting Nicole Kidman for the role? Trent is a funny character, but why keep the Acceptance song and Love Thy Neighbor when neither song substantially move the plot forward? Barry's arc in the film is already so inflated that Barry's going to prom is entirely redundant. I'm not saying that The Prom as a movie needed to be changed completely in order to justify its existence, but if Ryan Murphy was so passionate about preserving the content of the original show, he could have just filmed a performance of the original show and released that. Why make an adaptation if you're not going to bother to adapt it? Instead, you have a film that has some really charming and some genuinely moving moments, but it's too bloated, does not have a clear point of view on its themes, and puts the wrong focus on the wrong characters. And boy, do I have an opinion on what those wrong characters are. That brings me to my final point, 5, lesbian marginalization. Okay, so remember when I said that the film doesn't do anything meaningful to adapt the show to film? Well, the one exception is that the prom basically forces Emma to be the side character in her own story, and it de-lesbians the entire thing. Now, this doesn't start with the film. One of my biggest critiques of the original stage show is that it kind of already marginalizes its main lesbian characters, particularly when you think about the context of the show's origins. The authors of the show don't explicitly say it's based on a particular event, but it's born out of a series of high-profile news stories in the early 2010s in which queer teens, more out and visible than ever before, were denied the ability to go to proms and other school events due to their sexuality, clothing, and/or date choice. The one that most parallels the events of the prom is Constance McMillan's. McMillan was a Mississippi teen who wanted to bring her girlfriend to a prom and wear a tuxedo, but instead the school board decided to cancel prom altogether. The ACLU challenged the school, and courts found that the school district infringed upon her First Amendment rights. However, the school then set up a fake prom for McMillan to attend, while the real prom for the other students of the school was held at a secret location. McMillan spoke out about this experience, and several celebrities such as Green Day, Lance Bass, Kat Cora, and others who supported McMillan intervened and offered to fund a second inclusive prom that LGBT students, including McMillan and her girlfriend, could attend freely and without fear. Wow, that sounds so familiar. But if you notice, the main difference between Constance McMillan's story and the prom is that the celebrities didn't appear in the story until the very end, after McMillan went through the legal battles, after she was duped into going into a fake prom, and after she got some national recognition from speaking out about her experience. And look, the prom is not an event film or a biopic or based on a true story kind of thing. It has no obligation to follow a certain train of events for the sake of accuracy. Although I do think it would be hilarious if instead of 4 Broadway actors, you have like a former boy band star, a punk rock band, and one of the stars of Iron Chef go to Indiana and team up. I think that would be pretty hilarious. But anyway, knowing that the plot stems from an already compelling story about fighting discrimination, why go out of your way to add 4 characters that take up 60% of the stage time of the show to make a point about celebrity and the cynicism of good intentions that isn't even meaningful once we get to the final number? Was some Broadway producer or dramaturg like, it's great that it's gay, but it needs more fun gays. We're not trying to make fun home here. So since this is an issue that stems from the original play and not the movie, surely we can't just blame Ryan Murphy for it. Psych! Of course that's what we're gonna do, and here's why. Ryan Murphy could have used this film as an opportunity to flesh out the relationship and arcs of Emma and Alyssa and put them back to the center of the story, but of course he did the opposite of that. So let's go back to that list of changes. None of it adds anything for Emma and Alyssa, and in fact, it gives them less screen time to the point where they're the B-plot. There are barely even little moments for them in the interlude between scenes. They don't even kiss until the finale! What is this, High School Musical 2? We're supposed to believe that these 2 girls have been together for a year and a half and they don't even kiss when they're alone? We have to wait until the last 30 seconds? Ryan Murphy couldn't be bothered to add even small touches to make the Emma and Alyssa relationship feel real because he was too busy making Barry the main character, for reasons I can only discern as personal wish fulfillment. If I'm being generous, maybe some of this was to make Barry less of a stereotype and more of a well-rounded character.
A bucket of them!
But it's clear Ryan Murphy wanted to give himself the prom he never had and the reconciliation with his parents that he never really got through Barry's character. And sure, yes, as an artist, Ryan Murphy should be able to create the stories he wants to create and make happy endings for white middle-aged gay men. There should be more of those. But he does so literally to the detriment of the other gay characters in the movie. And they're not only gay, they are the main characters. He didn't need to do that. And like I was saying back in the casting problems section, it's weird that one of the lessons the characters learn is that celebrity doesn't make you more evolved or more important, but the characters played by celebrities get the most stuff to do. And if he was going to add all these scenes in which Barry talks about how painful it is to have been kicked out and disowned by his parents, why doesn't he share those scenes with Emma, the other person in the movie who was kicked out by her parents for being gay, and the actual protagonist of the movie? I feel like that's a no-brainer. It would really strengthen the bond between these two in a much more organic way if these 2 gay people who are from different generations and from different worlds realize that they actually have much more in common than they think, and it would be a really great moment of solidarity between them. But nope, instead of Emma explaining how much pain she went through from being kicked out, you need Grandma to explain it. Emma's lack of presence in the whole movie is also very apparent in just the way Emma behaves on screen. She barely seems like the protagonist. She's unfazed by everything happening to her, smiling and smirking while everyone at her school treats her like crap. It's like the opening number of Beauty and the Beast, but instead of Belle singing that there must be more to this provincial life, she's just like, if I'm smiling, I'm not really being bullied. This is Joanne Pellman's first movie, so maybe some of that is just the uncomfortable transition to film, but it's clear that this is just Murphy's vision for the character. In the play, Emma gives a lot more sarcastic comebacks and has a lot of witty, self-deprecating humor. Here, the best descriptor I can give for Emma is that she's nonchalant. Sure, her rights are infringed upon at every turn, and she doesn't have any friends, and her parents kicked her out, but she isn't upset about it, because that wouldn't be fun. When Barry talks about how Emma must be in a lot of pain for being rejected, Emma's grandma is basically just like,
although Emma is fine, she's a strong kid.
Which at this point is basically just providing some like textual excuse for why we don't actually see Emma go through any kind of emotional internal struggle. It feels like Principal Hawkins cares more about Emma going to prom than she does.
I just want to go to prom like any other kid.
I just think it would be nice if my rights as a human being were validated, if you're cool with that. Emma and Alyssa exist to remind us that there is a plot, but also as a reminder that the movie actually could have been about them, if that's something Ryan Murphy actually wanted to do, but he didn't. Okay, number 6, the good stuff. Let me just talk about things that I liked in the movie, because I know I've talked a lot about things that I thought didn't work. Regardless of anything bad about the movie, it is a comedy about a lesbian couple who end up happy together, and that is unfortunately very rare, so I am contractually obligated to like that. Joellen Pellman and Ariana DeBose practically have thankless roles, but they did have pretty good chemistry in the few minutes they had together. Also, the choreography is great. Casey Nicola, who choreographed the Broadway show, also oversaw the dancing in the movie, and it retains the same athletic, bouncy, joyful tone that made the show exhilarating to watch. It would have been nice to, see it. Zoom! Keegan-Michael Key as Tom Hawkins is amazing. He's the only grown-up character I genuinely wanted to see more of. He's an educator being a genuine ally for a young gay kid, and I really liked how he always stood up for Emma. We Look to You is also just a beautiful song, and maybe it's because I work in theater and because of the pandemic I just desperately miss my industry, but I really loved that song, and it really captured the magic and wonder of seeing live theater. Also, Keegan-Michael Key and Meryl Streep hooking up on screen is genuinely amazing. I think the songs in the mall are the best sequences and the most fun. Both the first part of Tonight Belongs to You and Love Thy Neighbor have the right blend of vibrancy and groundedness that I think the film is trying to go for. They filmed in a real shopping center during operating hours, so there are real people watching and wandering around, and it just makes the mall feel very alive. And yeah, those are the main things I really enjoyed about the movie. Alright, let's wrap up. So where does that leave how the prom will be remembered? I think this great article from Vulture about Murphy's work sums it up. Quote, "The humor and tension of so many of Murphy's earlier series came from an awareness of the world's unfairness and the absurdity of in-group politics. Resentment was the grist for his content mill. In his Netflix work, Murphy has created fantasies of acceptance, noble, perhaps, but quickly and cheaply earned." It's definitely true for The Prom. I think it's important for there to be films that are fantasies of acceptance, but The Prom tries to be both that fantasy and a deeply important, meaningful story about the fight against discrimination and being true to yourself. But in Ryan Murphy style, the film prioritizes brightness, glamour, and showmanship over emotional setups and story arcs, and you have the perfect example of a film created on good intentions it doesn't fully capitalize on. But like with many fans of Ryan Murphy's work, as much as I complain about him, I also don't want to undermine the good that Ryan Murphy has done. It's hard to watch Glee and not cringe, but we can't deny that it was a major turning point in LGBT representation on TV. He literally turned the Britney and Santana pairing from an offhand joke to a married couple because people on social media loved the idea so much. So he has a history of creating these great love stories for queer women, and I really hope he does more in the future. Although I think The Prom missed the mark in a lot of ways, it still made me cry, it still made me laugh and smile, and it made me miss seeing live theater in a time when theater isn't available. The Prom posits that through togetherness, cooperation, and genuine allyship, we are able to create space for ourselves and others around us to be true to themselves, which is always a message worth seeing. I hope that there are many LGBT teens who see this movie and find it empowering, and many older LGBT people who see this and find it familiar, and maybe even wish-fulfilling. But I also hope that someday The Prom gets an adaptation worthy of both its message and its magic. Until then, like in the prom, let's all come together as a community and blame Ryan Murphy. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in hearing more discussions and analyses about queer female media, please subscribe and let me know if there's anything you want me to talk about or delve into. Bye, gang!